Hi, welcome to SEMA 2021, and we have for you today a little discussion from the Society of Collision Repair Specialists on administrative time and research. And before we get started with our presentation, we'd very much like to thank the sponsors that make this possible for us to be able to do the presentation. And if we maybe go back to the sponsor screen just for a little longer. There we go. Okay, we definitely want to recognize all of these sponsors. They make it possible for us to be able to be here, and they contribute greatly to the education within the collision industry, and we value each and every one of them. Thank you. So let's move on with the individuals that we have here today. Today we have with us, I'll start at the far left, we have Barry Dorn, if we can move to the next slide. We have Barry Dorn from Dorn's Paint and Body, and Barry's here with us. He's an acting board member, past chair on the Society of Collision Repair Specialists. We have Kye Yeung from European Motor Car Works in Southern California, and he's a past chair with the Society of Collision Repair Specialists. And we have Michael Bradshaw, K&M Collision out of North Carolina, and he's currently an active board member. And then myself, my name is Tim Ronak, I'm with AkzoNobel, and I'm a board member as well. So today our conversation is going to circle around the complexities and the volume of activity that we've got related to documenting and researching repairs. And they've come to the point now where they're starting to call these things just admin time, and people are charging for things called admin time without any real clarification as to what that exactly is and what it entails. And frankly, it's a pretty dramatic part of the repair process, being able to document what it is that's needed to perform the repair. So I'm a consultant within the industry. I work for a large paint company, so I don't actively look up these procedures myself, but we have 3 individuals here on a daily basis are active in trying to determine what those procedures look like. So I guess I'll start with Barry. Barry, when you're looking up these procedures, when you have your team looking up these procedures, what are some of the things that stand out as being the most difficult or the most time-consuming part of that?
It all depends on the OE. A lot of the OEs have very easy sites to go to, and some of the OEs are incredibly complex. So you have to know each site, and you have to know how the flow goes in order to be able to find whatever it is that you need. The hard part about it is some of these procedures can be 500 to 600 pages long. And not only do you have to know that as the repair planner, but also the technician who's doing it.
Right. And so you said that all the OEs, some of them are very complex. So the OEs are different. Each of them attacks this problem or this information delivery differently. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Some of the sites are, they flow very easy, they flow very quickly, but there's some sites that are very archaic. You used to have some sites that mandate that you use Internet Explorer, which is not even supported any longer.
Well, that's an interesting point. I guess everybody runs out of technology at some point, right? And we've got to work backwards. Kye, you're also involved in this, looking up the procedures and some of the vehicles that you work on, some of the more exotic ones. What are some of the challenges when it comes to finding the individual procedure that you're looking for? It's one thing to navigate the pages, but you're looking for something very specific. I need to change that inner wheelhouse component. How do you go about documenting what's needed?
Well, some of the difficulties that we run into is that certain OEs may have their information on a subscription-based, product, and you might have to pay to get access to it. There's certain OEM procedures that have a certified type shop associated with it, and sometimes you can't access that information. But the thing that we find that when you go look at the table of contents, sometimes it's in disarray, like to your point, it's not always where you think it should be. And so fortunately for us, because we do the same type of vehicle time and time again, once we locate it, we can go back to it. And every manufacturer, it seems like continent that it's on, we start to get a feeling about where they locate it, on how they structure their repair procedures.
Right. So you make a good point about the logic. So some of them appear foreign to us in the way we think. What we would assume to be a natural, logical progression of the data. But in many cases, that natural, logical progression escapes us. We don't recognize what it is, and we lose sight of the fact that we've got 3 primary databases that we look at for the labor times that are attached to physical components that might bolt onto a car. And because we have this level of one structure for all vehicle brands, we seem to expect that the OE procedures should follow a similar format, right? And be able to find, but they're not. And so that introduces two levels of administrative time. There's a research component trying to find this stuff, and then there's also the interpretation component of reviewing all of this activity, all of this stuff. And Michael, you're active on this on a daily basis. So when it comes down to interpreting this information, how does your team understand and interpret and turn this information into physical acts out on the shop floor? How do you do that?
Well, so in our shop environment, the repair plan is being performed in conjunction with the repair technician. So we have a repair planner and a technician. They're reviewing the procedures in their entirety, and basically from that, they will interpret that information and create our repair blueprint, which is basically the scope of repairs for the vehicle. And from that, we're going to outline the individual operations that we've pulled from the repair procedures and translate those into billable items on our repair plan.
Okay, so because I work with a large number of clients, I'm just going to give you some of the pushback that they've gotten from some of the vendors they work with. Let's call them vendor partners. So why'd you bring that car in if you didn't know how to fix it?
So that's something we get a lot. And the other thing too, all of us here, we're highly certified facilities, certified by multiple manufacturers. And the expectation, I think, a lot from the payers in our industry, the insurance carriers, are that because you're certified, that means you should know how to repair that car. You shouldn't have to look up the procedures. Right. But in fact, all of our training, directly from the OEMs is look up the procedure every time, even if you repaired that vehicle, that same vehicle last week. Because, as with vehicle technologies, repair technologies are constantly changing, and they're changing at such a rapid pace that the procedure we perform today may not be the procedure that the manufacturer specifies 2 or 3 weeks from now. So I think, the difference is being certified gives you the equipment and knowledge of how to perform the processes that are required. But right. The actual repair procedure is in essence the instruction manual that's going to outline step by step how to repair the car. And by being certified, we have a greater understanding of how to adhere to that and make sure that the standard is withheld. And that's kind of how I explain it to the carriers that we deal with. There's no replacement for the OEM procedure information research. And I think, quite frankly, what we see in the industry is many times there are a lot of shops that aren't doing the research or are not doing it as thorough as they should be. And sometimes when you're not seeing itemized breakdowns or charges from certain shops within a market, it's because those shops aren't doing the job that they should be doing. And I think we could all agree, with that. We've run into competitors that, we've kind of had those conversations with. So
I want to tag on to Michael, what he said about looking up, the current repair procedures. Sometimes the procedures might be the same, but the adhesives or the rivets or the attachment methods might have changed. So that gives you a really good update as to, hey, it's the same procedure, but there's different methods to make it work.
You have them where they could be, you pull them up on a Tuesday, Tuesday the 10th, and on the following Thursday they've changed, and they've changed dramatically. So they tell you each time, and the problem is that you see some of these procedures can be 500 and 600 pages long, and so with that, how do you disseminate that and do it quickly, do it efficiently, and times 2 or 3 or more people? But to your point, is that that could be, and it could be serious too. It could be rivet location, it could be or just any sort of area that you're bonding. And that's serious to change that because you're changing the complete structure of the vehicle.
Ironically, I work with a large paint manufacturer. So when we're teaching people how to match colors and perform repairs, typically they may be having painters create something like a spray out. So they'll create these spray out panels so that in the future they can rely on these spray out panels to go back and look. Ironically, they're not able to do that with repair procedures. It's not like you look it up one time and you're done and you save it. You should really set fire to it after. Well, you keep it for your your records, but it's no longer valid as a repair instruction. And there was one manufacturer that in the space of 1 year changed the method to install a quarter panel 3 times. And depending...
Or more, sometimes some are more.
Sometimes more, but the point is, depending on when you repaired that vehicle, depended on whether you were actually following the OEM's repair instruction. And for those repairers that are listening to this, you know, in my mind, the mantra for collision repairs from 2019 on has been avoidable liability. Why on earth would you assume liability for a repair when those instructions are available to you in print? There may be a fee to access them, but that fee is part of that direct cost of repair. It's an avoidable expense that should be attached to that repair. And to that end, how do you guys handle the amount of time? I mean, is it something that you guys have a formalized way of charging for it? Do you break it out, and do you charge separate for the fees for access versus the labor and time to review it? And then do you charge for technicians to learn and understand that specific procedure?
So what's interesting is when I talk to some of the people that are in our industry, some of them don't charge for it. And always their reply is, hey, we can't get them to pay for it. And I always go back, well, you'll
The
never...
third party payer.
Exactly. So, you know, the bottom line is if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. So to answer your question, Tim, rather than make it confusing, what we've done initially is we've set a baseline of the costs. And it might be a half hour, it might be an hour, depending on how difficult it was. But we're consistent. So every time that third-party payer comes in, we produce the same line. It doesn't change. We don't have to argue that fact, and we receive compensation on that end.
Okay, so given that some of these repair procedures may be 10 pages and some may be 500 plus, do you scale this based on the amount of time so that maybe to review repair procedures from 0 to 25 pages is a certain unit of labor or time or dollar? How do you do that?
Yeah, so one of the things we've done in our shop is we've kind of put the repair or the OEM information research into categories, right? So what we found is mechanical related research or calibration related research or structural, related research. So we found it generally structural repairs require far greater, level of research. Yeah. So we would have a higher base charge for structural repair research than, say, the base research just to identify what operations may be needed after a battery disconnect or something. So I think really what you have to look at is the complexities of repair. I think that is the easiest way to at least get a good starting point. And even then, like Barry was saying earlier and Kye touched on it, the problem is the manufacturer systems are so different. So with one manufacturer, I can pull up a procedure and there will be a number of requisites that are required before I can get to that procedural step. But they'll hyperlink all of those requisite procedures.
To make them easy to find.
Right, so I can just, we can click on the link and it pulls them up. Now there are a lot of other manufacturers that still have the prerequisites that need to be performed, but there are no hyperlinks. And they don't really do a good job of even directing you where that procedure is. So now, so it's kind of two parts, right? So in one sense, there's the time involved to actually look up and pull all the procedures. And then in the next sense, like you touched on, it's comprehending those procedures, right? Having the individuals read through and be able to comprehend them. And so with certain manufacturers, your time spent accessing the procedures is going to be far less because they've spent a lot of time on their back end making it easy for their technicians and users to find the information they need. And the manufacturers that are still working on Internet Explorer have not quite spent that time. So you're gonna spend a lot more time. I mean, and we're not kidding when we say 4, 6, 8 hours for certain repairs it's realistic. I mean that is the real world we live in right now. And I think far too many in the industry don't understand it because they've not gotten in the habit of doing what they need to do, right?
That's correct.
So
Yep.
if when I say 4 to 6 hours, that sounds foreign to you or you think I'm crazy for saying that, you should probably reevaluate what you're doing in your shop. Because I promise, if you're not spending that kind of time, you're not doing it right.
Similar to Michael, we go with basically just the old adage of time and material. However long it takes. So Tim, to use your example of 10 pages versus 500, there's going to be a considerable amount of difference in the amount of time that the blueprinter and or the repair planner versus the technician spends. But it's still a considerable amount of time. And if you look at all three of the IPs, the information providers, all of them are very clear that none of that is an included time. It's included operation because it's a variable that they can't ascertain. So they clearly state in all of the guides that none of that is an included operation to be able to do it. And to your point, I've seen blueprinters spend, to Michael's point, 6, 7, 8 hours on one repair plan before the technician ever sees the car, and then the technician has to go through and spend 2 or 3 hours, for himself to be able to know exactly what the steps are. So it's critical to do it because we've seen it where cars have come in from other repair facilities that didn't. It was clear they didn't. We have no way of proving it, but they couldn't prove it, and it was clear by the repair that they didn't. So I think that not doing it, to Michael's point, is completely unacceptable. To your point, having the information, and it's yes, you do have to pay for it. You are going to have to pay for it. Keep in mind the dealers, the franchise dealers, they have to pay for it. So it's not like that they get it for free and we have to pay for it. Everybody has to pay, but that's the only way you can properly repair today's vehicles. I don't know how anybody can repair them without them.
Okay, so if we've got this need, this underlying need that we need to be doing this research, and it's called admin research or admin time, however you're going to be, or repair procedure research, if you're going to be doing this, shops that aren't currently doing it, here, look, this guy down the street charges admin time, so I need to charge admin time without understanding what's involved in that. You understand my point? So for those shops that currently have either gifted this and felt that they didn't know how to charge for it because they couldn't get paid for it, what would be, from each of you, what would be a tip for them to get started being able to substantiate and justify the rationale for this? And any of you can go first, but each of you, I'd love to hear each of you.
So I think a good place to start is the DEG. There's been several great DEG inquiries on this topic specifically. There's the IP's explanations that it's not included are referenced. They've responded that they're referenced in the P pages. That's pretty black and white for one. They could look to ICAR, right? What does ICAR always say? Always follow the OEM procedure. You can't follow the OEM procedure if you don't look it up and you don't have it, right? And then they can go straight to the OEs. Every OE out there follow the procedures in their entirety. So I think to me, it's really easy to substantiate. One, do we have to do it? That's a really easy question to answer. And two, is it included? And that's also a really easy question to answer. Based on the resources that are in the industry. And third, as far as calculating how you're going to charge for it or what that looks like, there are a ton of resources and tips out there from various parties within the industry of how to calculate it. I mean, you could do something as rudimentary as Googling how long does it take to read and comprehend a one-page technical document, right? That would be a great start. And, those are all ways that somebody could substantiate it in my mind.
Excellent. Kye?
So with us, we qualify a customer when they bring in a vehicle for repair. We let them know that there might be areas that we may have some pushback on. So it's their vehicle. We're looking out for their best interests. And it's nice to have the customer on your side. And so if there's an issue going into that third party compensating you, there's usually a good chance that when the customer is involved, you have a little bit more leverage. The other thing we do is when we do put a line item for OEM procedure, we try to separate it down into categories, whether it's structural, mechanical, electrical, and put that under the line item of what we found, put that in the estimate sheet, and then obviously go over that with the estimator, because a lot of them don't know that's part of the repair process. A lot of them come in and they're so used to maybe going to other shops that they just, here's my estimate, and they're not accustomed to that fine detail.
Right, and it builds credibility for yourself that you're going to do it right.
The only thing I would tell folks is that, sit down with your technicians, sit down with your team, and explain to them, hey, on this date, going forward. We're going to look this up. We're not going to worry about the bill payer or who's paying for it at the moment, especially for shops that haven't enacted it as a procedure or enacted it as a policy. Then once you have established a baseline with your own team and created that culture of learning within your facility, then start to see, the old adage, guys, and we all know this, or if we don't, we should, that if you don't ask, you're never going to get it. Okay, so that's step one. And even if you're turned down for whatever reason it may be a contractual agreement, it could be just no. At the end of the day, everything's a negotiation, but if you've got the documented proof that you did it, you're showing that you did it, you're printing a receipt showing that you paid for it, it's very few people that are going to say no to you. And you know what? Your staff is going to appreciate it. Your technicians are definitely going to appreciate it because then they know they're doing it in the right way, and you're building that culture of learning within your facility. And then, making it go forward, that guess what? That is cheap insurance from what Tim said a minute ago. Liability.
Yeah.
Liability. Liability.
Avoidable liability, that's the mantra. You want the lowest level of liability you can have based on the information available to you to repair that vehicle, without a doubt.
Another good tip for somebody really going down this road, to try to account for and bill for this, and try to educate a party that doesn't understand, right? That they're not used to seeing this procedure. They're not used to understanding the level of depth that we have to go through on our end. Use line notes within your estimate. When you charge for that, break out in a line note how many different procedures were accessed and how many total pages were those procedures, and that kind of at least helps communicate to the other party how much was involved in it. I see far too often you'll see a charge for something, there's not a line note, and if somebody looks at it and says 3.5 hours, for instance, to perform OEM repair research, well, that seems crazy. But if I looked up 500 pages and 36 procedures, does it really seem that crazy, right? So.
Exactly, and what this does is it starts to push back on those vendor partners about how much review they need to do before they move forward in judging whether or not what you've requested was reasonable or not. I have my neighbor's my dentist, and he had this great little phrase that he had. It said, Dr. Tessier performs all the procedures he feels are in the best interest and safety of his patients, not just the procedures your insurance company feels like they want to pay for. So, I've adopted that for many of the shops that I work with, and ironically, it's pretty powerful for people understanding that your ultimate goal is to make that car perform in its next collision exactly as it did the first time. That's really what this is all about. We're simply trying through finding what's required to restore that vehicle to its pre-accident functioning. We're simply trying to document that. And the worst part is there are a lot of repairers out there that have been doing this for 50 years and they know how to fix cars. Those are the ones that scare me the most, because I didn't know that simply on some vehicles, simply disconnecting a battery. Now think about this. That's our car battery gets cold out. The car needs a boost. They put a new battery in and they don't recalibrate the window sensors of such a minor thing. But a consumer can do this to themselves, and they don't know that they need to do that. And now some little kid's finger gets lopped off because the window wasn't recalibrated. It's a horrible consequence, but we need to be smarter than that. We work on these cars all the time. So, gentlemen, is there any other additional things you want to bring up as part of this?
Just that, as shop owners, I think we could all agree that I wish there was an easy button for this, right? Like, I wish there was an easy way to do this, and I think that's what gets lost, is it's not that we want to spend this amount of time. It's not that we're trying to create a charge for something that's not there. Right. To be quite frank, if there was an easy way to do it that was far less time consuming, we would all love it. But I think the reality of the situation is very soon, within the next couple years, these are going to become full-time positions within our shop, just to research information, not to create repair plans, not to look at vehicles after they've been disassembled. We're talking about pull and repair procedures and making sure that the rider and the technician has access to all the procedures pertinent to that car just so they can do their job. And I think that is just a reflection of where the industry's going, how time consuming it is. And again, we're not asking for this. You know, as a shop owner, I would love for all the OEs to put their heads together and figure out an easier way for us, right? Because it's not something that's an enjoyable thing, and I think we could all agree with that.
No, Michael, you make a fantastic point, and you know, I wasn't sure if you were referring to the collision repair industry when you say it doesn't have to be this hard, or just this. But anyway, we'll stick with just this. But it's you know, so much of what we do is new to us as well. It's not like we're seasoned vets at doing this, you know, each day. We've had to learn at it as we go. And at the end of the day, Michael makes a great point. It's almost to that point now where you have to have one person make that coordination. Because let's just take a step back for just a minute. Who didn't think that with all the ADAS, with all the safety features, with all the material substrate differences, with all of that this wasn't going to be more complex? This is not something that can be done with four walls and a dirt floor. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean it's getting to that point. I mean, you're doing restorations, that's one thing. But you're doing advanced collision repair on newer vehicles, that all of these new ADAS systems and all the substrates that everybody demanded we have for what? Safety, convenience, all the above. Who didn't think it's going to be more and more complex to fix? And that's where we're at. And we're at a critical point in the collision repair industry. I mean, all of us see that with their membership. We see it with our peers. We see it with each other, how much we've changed over the years just because of the way we used to do it. We've had to change. This is not something that any of us, as Michael said, wanted, that we begged for it. We've had to adapt, or else we know we're going away.
Yep, absolutely. Kye?
So, going back to what Tim said, there's a lot of technicians out there that are from the old school that think that they can repair everything, and it's kind of like, hey, that adage is not your father's Oldsmobile anymore. And so the situation that we have is, as shop owners, we've got to work on that culture. We need them to understand that the materials are different. Welding procedures are different. Construction is different. And the problem that we have is a lot of competitors out there choose to ignore this. The only thing I could fathom is either they're getting more production out of it, or they have agreements where they have to lower their severity costs. We don't know, but we need to, as an industry, encourage these other shops to understand the liability aspects that they're facing, and that the consumer's safety's at stake. That should be the key element. That's why what we do, we protect the consumer.
Yeah, Kye, and that's the key point. We are stewards of the safety of these consumers of the future, right? And their kids. And to be honest, what motivates me is that even in the neighborhood that I live in, I had young kids, and they would go to their friend's house, and their mom and dad would drive them to a soccer game. My kid could get in a car that was repaired poorly despite all of my best precautions, and something could have happened. And I've heard of incidents where poor repairs have resulted in consequence. The real issue is the only way to avoid that is to do your research, find out the right way to fix the car, and make sure you document it. Michael, I see you have one more comment.
Just one last point, and it goes back to the rapid changes in vehicle technology, and something we've really not touched on is technician safety, right? As virtually every manufacturer adds electric vehicles to their fleet,
yep,
the technician safety becomes paramount. And as shop owners, you've got to instill these standard operating procedures in your facilities to protect not only the families that are getting back in these vehicles, but the technician that's working in your facility every day. And that again just adds another layer that I think really speaks to where we're going, right? We've had advanced material become standard on cars that we would have never imagined. We've got aluminum intensive vehicles now that are mass marketed, mass produced vehicles. You've got all the ADAS features, and now we're going to be dealing with mass marketed electrified vehicles too. So I think it's paramount to technician safety that's done.
Yeah, so it's not just consumers, it's our staff as well. Absolutely. Well, is there any other final comments?
The only thing I want to, and Michael, you just made me think of it. It's funny. We had some of our team did some OE training a few weeks ago, and this is not a popular electric car manufacturer, but this was a German manufacturer, to your point, that has a service mode in their car that we've been working on their cars for years. Didn't know it because it doesn't say it anywhere in there. It says it in their procedures for the service technician. That's not what we see. But there's a service mode in there because the consumer can unlock the door, can open the rear hatch, can do all kinds of things with the car remotely. And so if you don't lock them out, that technician's hands getting caught in the door, and that all the things that we would have never imagined 10, 15 years ago. But this is not it's an advanced vehicle, but it's not. It's an ICE vehicle. It's it's gas, and it's been running around for a while. Had no idea. Right. But again, it's those types of things, those small things that you learn by going through the procedures, by diving deep. And unfortunately, sometimes you got to dive a little deeper than what you thought. But Michael, excellent point on technician safety.
Yeah. Well, what we would like to do is wind it up if there's no other comments. All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We'd like to thank ICAR for being able to put this together for us, and the SCRS, the Society of Collision Repair Specialists, thanks you for listening, and we hope to be back with you again on another topic in the near future. Thank you for attending SEMA 2021 and our discussion. We're done. Was his hands okay?
I'm used to people not laughing at my jokes. It's fun.
What jokes? I didn't hear your name. What did you